I've worn this robe for more than 4 decades, long enough to understand that justice isn't simply about statutes and precedents. It's about choices. It's about dignity. It's about what kind of person you are when no one's grading you. And on a gray, wet Thursday morning in New York City, case number 24 T1A07 landed on my docket with a name that already felt like a warning before I read a single word. The clerk announced it clearly: State of New York versus Bryce Langford. The moment he walked in, I felt the air in the room change. Some defendants shuffle in quietly, some come in trembling. Bryce Langford walked in like he owned the building. He was 19, not quite a boy, not yet a man. Tall, sharp features, hair freshly cut like he'd stopped at a barbershop on the way over. He had on a white Dior hoodie that probably ran more than my first month's salary, Balenciaga sneakers, a silver Rolex that caught the light with every movement, a belt buckle stamped with a large gold H, Hermes, in case anyone in the room hadn't figured out who he thought he was. Even his cologne announced him before he reached the bench, that thick, expensive scent of money and self-assurance. He didn't stand upright the way nervous young men usually do. He leaned against the rail with one elbow like he was waiting for a cab. But the real thing he carried into my courtroom wasn't the watch or the designer belt. It was his phone, glossy black, brand new triple camera. He kept tapping it like someone important was waiting on a reply. The charges on my screen told a different story than his posture suggested. Failure to yield to a stopped school bus, passing on the right, speeding, and then the line that made my jaw set: assault on an individual over the age of 60. The clerk read it softly, like she hated having to say it. I looked up at him. "Mr. Langford, do you understand what you've been charged with?" He smirked. Not a smile. A smirk. "Yeah, I got it. Can we move this along? I have class." I've heard every possible tone in this room over 40 years: guilt, panic, remorse. But that one was something else entirely: entitlement in its purest form. Like the law was a minor inconvenience, like a courtroom was somewhere he'd accidentally ended up. I said, "This is not a drive-through window, son. This is a court of law." He shrugged. "Whatever." Then the victim stepped forward and the entire temperature of the room shifted again. This time it had nothing to do with Bryce. Her name was Maria Delgado, 56 years old, a registered nurse at New York Hospital, 28 years on the floor, night shift, the kind of nurse who doesn't just clock in and out. She's the one holding someone's hand at 2 a.m. when they're terrified and alone. She wore plain navy scrubs, no jewelry, no makeup, hair pulled back like she had more important things to worry about. She carried that particular exhaustion that good, hard-working people develop. Not weakness, but the weight of constantly giving more than you have. Her left arm was fitted in a soft brace. Purple bruising was still visible near her elbow. When she took the oath, her voice wavered slightly. Not from fragility, from the effort of keeping herself together. I addressed her carefully. "Miss Delgado, you're here regarding the incident on Elmwood Avenue on October 14th? "Yes, Your Honor," she said. I turned to Bryce. "You see this woman? She is not a background character in your story. She is a human being." He rolled his eyes so hard it looked almost painful. Officer Daniel Riley, badge number 317, came forward next. The kind of officer whose voice stays level because he's witnessed too much to be shocked anymore. He laid out the report methodically. "Your Honor, at 10:47 p.m., Miss Delgado exited New York Hospital following the end of her shift. She proceeded to the employee parking area near Elmwood and Lockwood, where she observed a black Lamborghini Urus traveling southbound at approximately 52 miles per hour in a posted 25-mile-per-hour zone. That word Lamborghini landed in the courtroom the way it always does. It splits a room right down the middle. Either someone put in decades of work to earn it, or someone's father handed over the keys and the kid assumed the laws of the road didn't apply to him, regardless of whether the car cost $70,000 or $300,000 or more. Officer Riley continued. A school bus was stopped on Elmwood with its red lights activated and stop arm extended. The vehicle passed on the right side, crossing the bike lane, and came within feet of the rear corner of the bus. Maria closed her eyes as he spoke, like she was watching it replay. Miss Delgado witnessed the event and raised her hand, signaling the driver to stop. She shouted for him to slow down, that there were children present. The defendant stopped briefly near the crosswalk, then exited the vehicle and approached her. I leaned in. Approached how? "Aggressively, Your Honor. He used profane language and told her to stay out of his business. When she attempted to walk away, he grabbed her by the wrist. She pulled back. He shoved her. She fell backward onto the curb, striking her left elbow on the concrete. She sustained bruising, a sprain, and reported dizziness and nausea at the scene. I looked at her brace again. I've processed more injury reports than I can count. What gets me every time isn't the bruise itself. It's when the injury belongs to someone who got hurt simply for doing what was right. Miss Delgado, I said, why did you say something? She looked at me like the answer should have been obvious to everyone in the room. Because my sister's son was struck by a car when he was 8 years old. He survived, but he walks with a limp today. And I treat children at the hospital regularly. Broken bones, traumatic brain injuries, and sometimes worse. She paused. I didn't want to stay quiet and then hear a siren. That sentence settled over the courtroom like fog. I didn't want to stay quiet and then hear a siren. I looked back at Bryce. He let out a short laugh, actually laughed, a little exhale like she was exaggerating. Then loud enough for the whole room, he said, "She's fine. People fall all the time. This whole thing is a scam." Maria flinched at the word scam. Something old and steady rose in my chest. Not the kind of anger that makes you lose your footing, the kind that sharpens your focus. Mr. Langford, you are standing in a courtroom. You will not refer to a nurse's injury as a scam while she is standing in front of you wearing a brace you caused. He leaned toward the microphone. Judge, I'll be straight with you. This is completely overblown. My dad's going to straighten this out anyway. The room made a sound, not words, just that collective stillness you get when someone says the unspoken part aloud. And then Bryce said it, the line that made the clerk's eyebrows rise and the bailiff's posture stiffen. Call my daddy. Said it like an instruction, like I was his personal assistant. I kept my face neutral. That's part of the job. But internally I thought, son, you have no idea where you are. Excuse me, I said. He tapped his phone on the rail. Call my daddy. Put him on speaker. He'll walk you through how this is going to go. I took a slow, measured breath. I've had defendants threaten litigation against me. I've had people weep, bargain, rage. But this was something different. This was a young man so thoroughly insulated by wealth that he had come to believe the legal system was just another complaint department. I looked at my clerk. Do we have a contact on file? Officer Riley responded. His father is listed as Howard Langford. Number was provided at the scene. The defendant declined to sign the citation and stated, quote, my family owns this town. Bryce smiled like that was something to be proud of. Now, before I tell you what came next, I want to ask you something honestly. Stay with me through the next few minutes and tell me whether you've ever seen arrogance unravel quite this fast. Because what surfaced in evidence afterward made even me pause. I said, Mr. Langford, you're asking me to call your father? Yeah, he said. Go ahead. I nodded slowly. All right. His posture changed instantly. He straightened up like he was watching the opening credits of his favorite film. He was certain he was about to be rescued. I directed the clerk to dial the number and put it on speaker. 2 rings. A man answered. This is Howard. Mr. Howard Langford? Yes, who's calling? This is Judge Judy, New York Municipal Court. Half a second of silence, then a recalibration in his tone. Not deference, not panic, calculation. Judge, what can I do for you? Bryce mouthed across the room. Told you. Your son Bryce is in my courtroom, case 24T1A07. He's facing charges of passing a stopped school bus, reckless driving, and assault of a nurse. Howard Langford produced a low, dismissive chuckle. Judge, I'm certain there's been some kind of misunderstanding here. Bryce is a good kid. Maria stared at the phone like she was watching something she couldn't quite believe was real. Mr. Langford, your son told me to call you. He said you would explain how this works. A beat. I'm not sure what he meant by that. Bryce's smile flinched. Howard's voice continued, measured. I'm traveling, but I can have my attorney reach out to... You don't need to contact anyone, I said. You just need to listen. Bryce leaned toward the speaker. Dad, go ahead. Tell him. Howard said flatly, Bryce, be quiet. That snapped Bryce's head back like he'd walked into a glass door. You could see it register on his face. He was not accustomed to hearing those words from that voice. I turned to Officer Riley. Do we have footage? Yes, Your Honor. School bus camera, hospital parking lot security footage, and a 911 call time-stamped at 10:49 p.m. We played the bus camera first. Rain-slicked streets, lights reflecting off asphalt, the stop arm fully extended, red lights flashing. And then a black SUV, low and moving fast, sliding past the right side of the bus like the driver had decided none of it applied to him. The courtroom reacted. Soft sounds. Someone near the back whispered something under their breath. I looked at Bryce. That's your vehicle? I mean, technically, yeah, but nobody was even in the road. Officer Riley said, Your Honor, the bus operator reported 2 students were still in the roadway near the center line. Both jumped back. Bryce shook his head. Of course she said that. Then we played the hospital lot footage. Grainy but unmistakable. Maria walking toward her car after a long shift. The Lamborghini rolling up. The door swinging open. Bryce stepping out with the casual energy of someone arriving somewhere they were supposed to be. Maria raising her hand, clearly speaking. His gestures becoming sharp. And then his hand on her wrist. Her pulling away. His shove. Her going down hard. When her elbow hit the pavement, I felt it myself. I know that moment. The split second where your body forgets to breathe. Maria turned her face away from the screen. The tears weren't a performance. She was revisiting something she hadn't finished processing. Bryce watched it with the mild interest of someone flipping through channels. She fell. I barely made contact. I leaned forward. Your hands are on her in that footage, Mr. Langford. He lifted his chin. The angle's garbage. You can't see anything clearly. Language. Sorry, it's just, Judge, you don't understand how this works. People in her position look for opportunities. That's the reality. Maria's face didn't show anger. It showed something quieter and more painful than that. The look of someone being told their suffering is a business strategy. People in her position, I repeated. Then Bryce looked directly at me and said, No disrespect, Judge, but you're not exactly operating at my level either. The room went rigid. I've absorbed a great deal of disrespect in this seat over 4 decades, but that particular comment wasn't about my ruling. It was about what he believed divided us, a class distinction he apparently assumed I would simply accept. I sat back and let silence work. Silence is its own kind of gavel. Then I said, Son, my level is called accountability. I'd recommend it. He rolled his eyes, but I noticed his foot had started tapping against the floor. The composure was beginning to fracture. Officer Riley stepped forward again. Your Honor, there's additional evidence. Go ahead. At 11:12 p.m., the defendant posted an Instagram story. Bryce's head snapped up. That's not admissible. It is when it contains statements directly related to the incident, Your Honor. Screenshots were preserved with a digital chain of custody, verified and signed by Detective Layla Chen, NYPD Cyber Unit. I accepted the printed pages. The first image, Bryce behind the wheel of the Lamborghini, grinning. Caption, almost smoked a bus, lol. The next post, a blurred image of Maria on the ground. Caption, Karen down. Maria made a sound like something inside her gave way. And then the third, a selfie video. Bryce laughing, the hospital sign visible in the background. His voice, some broke nurse tried to check me. Told her call the cops, like I care. My dad's got judges on speed dial. I looked up slowly. Mr. Langford, is that your voice? He swallowed. It's just a joke. A joke. People post things. It doesn't mean anything. I want you to understand what you posted. You photographed a woman you had just shoved onto concrete and you captioned it, and then you filmed yourself laughing about it. He shrugged without conviction. Officer Riley cleared his throat. Your Honor, there is a second clip, obtained via Snapchat. A witness forwarded it to multiple people prior to deletion, which removed the expectation of privacy. Bryce's face drained. That was private. It was shared to multiple recipients, Your Honor. That changes its legal status. We played it. Bryce in what appeared to be his bedroom. Designer clothing heaped on a chair like laundry. A Louis Vuitton bag on the floor, music loud in the background. He held up his car keys to the camera and said, Guess who just bodied a nurse and still made it home? Then laughed, then added, If she doesn't make it, I'll send flowers. Gucci, obviously. The courtroom went completely still. Even Bryce stopped moving. Maria whispered, barely audible, He actually said that? I looked at him. You made a joke about her dying. His mouth moved, but nothing useful came out finally. It was dark humor. I didn't mean it literally. Dark humor is what people reach for when their conscience isn't doing its job. Then Officer Riley cleared his throat once more. Your Honor, there is also a related matter, federal in nature. That word dropped like a stone. Federal. I raised my eyebrows. Explain. The vehicle is registered to Langford Holdings, LLC. There is an active inquiry into VIN number tampering and the interstate transport of a stolen vehicle. The FBI formally requested notification if Bryce Langford appeared in any court proceeding. Bryce's voice broke. What? That has nothing to do with... From the side of the courtroom, a man rose from his seat. Plain suit, no theatrics, badge clipped to his belt. He walked forward without hurry. Mark Sullivan, Federal Bureau of Investigation, New York Field Office. He turned to me. Your Honor, I'm not here to interfere with your proceedings. However, the defendant's online posts and location data were used to confirm the vehicle's presence following a theft reported out of New Jersey on September 29th. We also have evidence suggesting coordinated VIN alteration. I looked at the Lamborghini keys sitting on the evidence table. They looked different now. I turned toward the phone. Mr. Langford, are you still on the line? Howard Langford's voice returned, tight, controlled. Yes, Judge. Were you aware your son may have been operating a stolen vehicle? Silence, long enough to mean something. When he finally responded, his voice had lost whatever warmth it had carried at the start of the call. Judge, I'm not sure what you're suggesting, Agent Sullivan said calmly. Mr. Langford, this is Agent Sullivan. We have warrants in process. Bryce's knees visibly buckled. He gripped the rail. And then, for the first time, his father's voice cracked. Bryce, what did you do? Bryce spun toward the phone, desperation breaking through everything. I didn't do anything. They're making this up. Tell them who we are. Tell them who we are. Some people believe a family name is a form of legal protection, a wall that keeps consequence at bay. I leaned forward and spoke with precision. In this courtroom, no one's surname functions as a shield. Not yours, not mine, not anyone's. Then Bryce did something that still sits with me. He turned and pointed directly at Maria and said, "This is on her. If she had kept quiet, none of us would be here right now." Maria stood completely still, not from fear, from disbelief, the look of someone confronting a cruelty they hadn't fully prepared for. I said, "Miss Delgado, would you like to address the court?" She nodded, collected herself. "Your Honor, I don't carry hatred toward him. I don't even know him, but I treat children at the hospital who never receive a second chance. I sit with mothers who would give everything for one more day with their child." She paused, and he stood there and laughed. Her voice broke softly. "I have a son. He's 17. He wants to be a paramedic. And I keep thinking, what if someone like this hits him one day and posts a video about it?" The courtroom didn't react with outrage. It reacted with something quieter and more resolute. The kind of collective recognition you get when every person in a room crosses the same moral line at the same moment. I looked at Bryce. "Your father cannot repair your character. Only you can do that." Then to Agent Sullivan, "Agent, do you require him today?" "Your Honor, we are prepared to take him into federal custody pending processing if the court determines it appropriate." Bryce's grip on the rail tightened. His knees nearly gave. And that's when the voice he had spent the morning invoking, the one he believed could override everything, finally spoke again, not with power, with something much smaller. Howard Langford said quietly into the speaker, "Judge, please, what can be done?" I said, "Now you're asking the right question." I looked at Bryce. "You wanted your father called. You got exactly that." His voice was barely there now. "I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did. You meant every word of it until the consequences showed up." I reviewed the charges one final time: reckless driving, passing a stopped school bus, assault, and the federal matter waiting for him beyond these walls. This court is municipal. The federal case falls outside my authority, but what happens in this room does not. I turned to Maria Delgado. "Miss Delgado, you work nights. You care for strangers who don't know your name. You tried to prevent harm to children you'd never met, and you were physically hurt for it." She wiped her cheek. "I just want him to understand," she said. I looked back at Bryce. "Understanding costs something sometimes. He lifted his chin. One final attempt. Judge, this isn't fair. You can't just... I finished the thought for him. Unfair is shoving a nurse onto concrete at 10:49 at night and captioning a photo of her on the ground. Unfair is laughing about a school bus full of children. Unfair is walking into this room believing that your net worth determines your accountability. Then I issued the sentence. On the traffic charges, the statutory maximum, $500 for bypassing the school bus, $300 for reckless driving, full court costs applied. On the assault, 90 days suspended with 1 year of formal probation, mandatory anger management, a no-contact order protecting Maria Delgado. He opened his mouth. I raised my hand. And because you chose to mock the work of a nurse, you will now learn what that work actually looks like. I looked at him squarely. 200 hours of community service, not in a comfortable office, not in a well-funded neighborhood program. You will complete those hours at a hospital volunteer program, designated and approved by your probation officer, performing support services, transport, linens, equipment, the unglamorous, essential, invisible labor that keeps those institutions running, the kind of work that teaches you what human dignity actually looks like from the inside. He shook his head quickly. No, I'm not. That's not happening. Then you'll serve the 90 days. His eyes shot to the phone. Dad... Howard Langford's voice came back hollow. Bryce, do what the judge is telling you. Bryce looked at the speaker like he was hearing a stranger. Agent Sullivan stepped forward quietly. Mr. Langford, we'll be speaking once these proceedings conclude. Please don't complicate things further. It hit him in stages. The nurse standing there still in her brace, the footage on record, the federal agent with warrants pending, and his father's voice finally telling him to listen. He whispered, "This can't actually be happening." But it was. I let the silence hold for a moment, and then I spoke more quietly. Mr. Langford, you have a choice in front of you. You can allow this to be the moment you begin becoming someone worth respecting, or you can allow it to be confirmation of everything people already assume about you. That decision belongs entirely to you. He stared at the floor, at his sneakers, like they might tell him something useful. Maria stood quietly beside him, still injured, still dignified. You will also write a letter of apology to Miss Delgado, I added. Not a legal document, not something drafted by an attorney, a human letter. And you will read it aloud in this courtroom at your compliance review on January 19th at 9 a.m. He swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. I nodded. Good. As the bailiff directed him toward the back, Bryce turned once. And for the first time since he'd walked in that morning, he looked genuinely frightened. Not of me, not of the sentence. He looked frightened of losing the world he had assumed was permanently his. The phone speaker clicked. Howard Langford said quietly, Judge, thank you. I didn't respond with satisfaction. I responded with the only thing that felt honest. Don't thank me. Raise your son. After the room cleared, I stayed in my seat for a few minutes. I've watched more lives split into before and after than I can count. A single decision, a single moment of cruelty, a single shove. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, a single moment of genuine accountability can pull someone back before they're too far gone. But here is what I want to leave with you. Justice is not vengeance. It's equilibrium. It's the institutional statement that no one stands above the law and no one stands beneath basic dignity. Maria Delgado didn't come to that courtroom for a payout. She came because she believes that saying something matters. In a world that rewards noise and performance, she chose something quieter. She chose courage. Bryce Langford walked in that morning believing his last name was currency. He walked out understanding it was just a word. And words, it turns out, do not erase video evidence. I think about my own father sometimes. He believed a person's worth had nothing to do with what they wore or what they drove or who could be reached on their behalf. He said it was determined entirely by how they treated someone who could offer them nothing in return. If this story landed with you, I appreciate you staying with it to the end. And if you want to hear the next case, and the one where a man attempted to hand me cash on the record and didn't realize every second was being captured, stay close. That one may be even harder to believe.